important one here. The Saudis, I don't think, have been relying on the Turks for that long, but the Turks are really pivotal to what the Saudis are trying to do right now. If you look back barely a year ago, before King Salman was on the throne in Saudi Arabia, when it was Abdullah, King Abdullah was pursuing a very intense drive, not just against Iran in the region, but also against the Muslim Brotherhood in the region. And in this regard, he found himself at odds with the Turks, primarily over Egypt. And so those relations were actually quite hostile then. Now, under Salman, they've done a 180 on the Brotherhood and tried to focus all of their assets on combating Iran in the region, which in some ways has been effective. In other ways, they've struggled. But I think the Saudi strategy in Syria to back hardline Islamist fighters there really is dependent on the Qataris and the Turks delivering through their contacts.
What about the U.S.? What about the U.S. part, David? The second part of this. We have a new president in January. Have they got a plan B if that president leaves the region?
Well, I think provided that there is a mainstream candidate that wins the election on either side of the aisle, which now is looking more in question than
anything's possible, David. Absolutely,
yeah,
anything.
Exactly. I think that's part of what it depends on. I just got back from the Gulf several weeks ago, and everyone I talked to expected to see an American president in 2017 that was more willing to push back against Iran, more willing to push back against Russia, but within the constraints of what the current administration has established and committed to in the region. And so I think you'll see those two factors contending against each other in the year ahead.
To what degree do you think that the American action in response to the proposed Russian sale, the Sukhoi sale, will affect the perception of those parties if they see the United States fails to block it? And State Department this week, by the way, said it is a violation of the arms embargo, but Kerry refused to say what they would do. Do you think that a failure to act there will have a decisive impact on their perception and their willingness in the coming months to act?
Are you talking about the Russian sale of anti-aircraft?
Right. No, not the anti-aircraft, the Sukhoi sale, the sale of the fighter jets.
The jets. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you there. I think Sukhois are not necessarily... Personally, I don't see them as that big a threat to the Gulf states, given what they can field with F-15 and F-16 very advanced packages.
Well, it's not the sale. Just to be clear, I didn't mean that. I meant the failure to act to block the sale, sending a message that we are, in fact, withdrawing all of our objections and enabling then the Russians and the others to dictate the outcome in Syria.
Yeah,
we've chosen a side, in other words, David. Right. We've chosen a side.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's basically the conclusion that the Gulf states have reached long ago, that the United States is not going to stand up against the Russians when it comes to Iran, when it comes to Syria. And the pivotal moment there was the red lines issue with regard to chemical weapons there. There was I follow a couple of prominent designated individuals designated by the U.S. or UN on terror finance charges in the region on social media. And I was looking at the profile of one of them today, and he had a political cartoon up there of Iran, of Syria, of the Russians, those political leaders hanging out together, and America taking a selfie with them. Uncle Sam right up there with them. And I think that reflects the mood among a lot of not just Islamist hardliners, but also many of the prominent, actual political leaders in the region. There is a real view that America is more interested in engaging with countries like Russia or Iran than in backing the Gulf states. And unfortunately, that's going to be a tough climb for the next administration.
David Weinberg is a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. Within hours, an election in Iran. Careful. A decision in Iran about what the future will look like in the hands of the supreme leader and his chosen... Now, careful. We welcome Mohsen Sazagari, an Iranian journalist, to help us understand what the expectation is now that Iran has the Iran deal, now that it's in league with Russia and Syria and the Hezbollah to push back against the rebels of Syria, now that it says that it has money flowing, now that it's in open dispute with the Riyadh. What does the supreme leader want in the Majlis? That's the parliament. What does this tell us about the future of Iran? Mohsen, a very good evening to you. Carefully now, are there any moderates to discuss after tomorrow's vote? Good evening to you.
Hey, good evening, John and Malcolm. Actually, by mechanism in Constitution of Iran, a Council of Guardians, which are 12 people, 6 of them are jurists and 6 attorneys, all appointed by the leader. They should ratify any candidate for any election. And they are under finger of the leader. For Assembly of Experts, the 89 seats assembly, which is in charge of choosing new leader if the present leader dies, they have handpicked all candidates. For 89 seats, there are only 153 candidates, and only three of them, Hashemi Rafsanjani, Rouhani, the president, and the Alawi Minister of Intelligence, you can say that, okay, these people are somehow moderate and are different from the others. The other people who are candidates for Assembly of Experts, they are all from the hardliner faction. They are under control of the leader, house of the leader, and Revolutionary Guard. So, and more ridiculous, that 9 seats of 89 seats already, actually they are chosen because there are only one candidate for that seat. So, election in 6 provinces of Iran is meaningless.
So, Mohsen, I want to go on so I can summarize by saying the Iran deal has not loosed the strength of the moderates. It remains very much in the hands of the supreme leader. Malcolm?
Yeah, they reversed the decision on about 1,500 of the candidates that had been knocked off and disqualified, we should say. I think they disqualified altogether more than 7,000 out of the 12,000. So what does this mean? Is this a reflection of the unhappiness of the people and the fact that they had to respond in some way to it? Is it an indication of anything larger? Do you see any really good outcome of this election?
For Parliament, which has 300 seats, first of all, again, we should notice that Council of Guardians should select and ratify any candidate. And second, Parliament of Iran, any bill that Parliament passes should be ratified by Council of Guardians. So actually the Parliament in this constitution is not a real Parliament. It easily is controlled by Council of Guardians, which is controlled by the leader. But for this election, as you mentioned, Malcolm, 7,000 were refused, and amongst the 5,000 and a few hundred, just during the last 24 hours, about 1,500 more candidates dropped and said that they don't continue. Maybe they don't have money or they don't see any stage for themselves. And again, already, as far as I know, and my sources and my friends have calculated, in 180 seats, most of them are small cities that have only one seat for that city. Already Revolutionary Guard have refused any candidate. And apparently, if you have 2 or 3 candidates, all of them are from Revolutionary Guard. So before the election, again, the majority, 180 seats, are controlled by Revolutionary Guard. And doesn't matter that amongst 2 or 3 candidates from a small city who will be chosen, who will be elected. Any of them are the guys from Revolutionary Guard. So
what you're telling us is that, Mohsen, just a moment now, this goes back to 2009. What we're looking at then is the confirmation that this is a military coup extending itself into the 7th year, that they're running this since they took over the government and negated the actual vote in 2009. Is that correct summary?
Yes, they have got more power from 2009.
Right.
And but something has happened. There are some difficulties and differences between 2 parts of Revolutionary Guard: Basij, which is militia, and Revolutionary Guard. They have started to clash each other somehow. And now, although both have upper hand everywhere, but they have problems with each other. It has happened during last 1 or 2 years.
But let me just clarify, because I'm sure for people this is a very difficult to understand exactly what is happening here. If there's a big turnout tomorrow, does that benefit the reformers? Is it dependent on where they come from? If they come from the urban areas, young people turn out to vote. Can they make any difference, or is it only as a demonstration?
And we have 30 seconds, Mohsen. Be quick.
It's only a demonstration. It doesn't affect the combination of the parliament or assembly of experts. But if millions of people come and vote, for instance, to Rafsanjani or Rouhani for assembly of experts, or some few reformists who are still candidates, it can be just a good show and showing the leader that the majority of people are supporting these guys. But there is no, it doesn't have any real...
Mohsen Sazagari, a journalist, an Iranian journalist, Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor. Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations, is here with me, and all eyes on Syria, on the prospective Syria ceasefire. Within these last hours, the President of the United States has commented. I'm looking at the Reuters report. The President has said that there are reasons for skepticism, and then this quote: "None of us are under any illusions. We're all aware of the many potential pitfalls, and there are plenty of reasons for skepticism, but history would judge us harshly if we did not do our part in at least trying to end this terrible conflict with diplomacy." We welcome Lee Smith of the Weekly Standard, who's just returned from the region. And before we explore the avenues, we ask Lee for a comment on the president's skepticism. Lee, is it well-founded? What is your opinion of this ceasefire where all parties are not participating, where there will be no referees? Good evening to you.
Well, actually, yes. Good evening, John. Good evening, Malcolm. Actually, there is a referee. There is a referee, and there's the person who wrote there's a party that wrote the rule book, and that's Russia in both cases.
Yes.
So the president's reason for skepticism is well-founded. However, I believe it goes a little deeper and it's a little darker than that. Look, Secretary Kerry has been acting as the Russians' lawyer for several months now, and this is certainly the case. I mean, this is the deal that they're trying to shove down everyone's throat. I mean, what this deal amounts to essentially is demanding that the anti-Assad opposition puts down its arms, and that even though it knows that the Russians will continue to target them, not ISIS and not simply Jabhat al-Nusra, but all anti-Assad opposition. That's what the Russians have been doing up until now, and they will continue to do it. And there is no room for the rebels to fight back because they will be in violation of the agreement. And the Russians are the only party on the ground to monitor and enforce the agreement. So it's frankly not enough for the president or for the Secretary of State to say they're skeptical about it. They have they have served as the Russians' lawyers. It's disgraceful.
And do you see any restrictions being placed on the kind of weapons that Russia is now supplying Hezbollah? The reports of much more sophisticated weapons coming in to being delivered to Hezbollah, delivered to others, and any change in the Russian role in Syria?
I think that in terms of Hezbollah, I mean, well, first of all, the answer to your first question is if there's any way to monitor this and to prohibit this. I mean, the only party that can do that is Israel, and I believe that Israel is keen to do that. I would say if there is a change in the Russian role in Syria, that would be it. It would be what it's actually doing with Hezbollah and for Hezbollah. Though one of the things we have to realize, while people have spoken about the deconfliction mechanism between Israel and Russia, the purpose of which is to make sure their planes don't hit each other, we also have to realize that the Russians are not just there. They're not acting separately from Hezbollah. When the Russians are flying, when they're flying missions, when they're flying operations, it's Hezbollah who is taking ground and holding ground. So the idea that the Russians have nothing to do with Hezbollah is very wrong. So this is another dangerous situation that's developing. This one in particular is dangerous for Israel. But there are other situations that are developing that are difficult for other people on the ground, other American allies.
Don't you see ultimately, though, that Russia and Hezbollah, and this is a question, will be at odds? We saw the statement by the founding Secretary General of Hezbollah just this week, condemning the association with Russia, calling for Hezbollah to get out of it and withdraw even from the Syrian conflict and leave it to the Russians. Do you see ultimately that they will have to be in some sort of diversion of their interests and tracks?
Are you talking about Sabi Tofeli's comments? I mean, he's been critical of the. The reason he was flushed out of Hezbollah, the reason is no longer
was his criticism.
He's been critical of the role that Iran plays with Hezbollah for nearly 20 years. So I kind of like him. I admire him in many ways. He speaks his mind, and I agree with him in what he says. But I think that just because Tofeli says this, I don't think this is going to push the Russians and Hezbollah away from each other.
No, but the fundamental interests will diverge of Russia and Hezbollah ultimately. And Russia faces the problem of Islamist fundamentalism within the country, and ultimately that will be put to the test.
The Russian fundamentalism, they're dealing with Sunnis. Russian fundamentalism, their problem, I understand it. Their problem is only partly with Sunni fundamentalists, right? Their major problem is with the Sunni order of the region, of the Middle East. And that's backed by the United States. We're not talking about fundamentalists. We're talking about Saudi Arabia. We're talking about Turkey. We're talking about Egypt. We're talking about Jordan. That's Moscow's fundamental problem. It's the Sunni order, the American-backed order of the Middle East. It's not about fundamentalism. They have only one option in the region, and that's to play alongside Iran and Hezbollah. Are there differences? There are differences between, even at the best of times, there are differences between the United States and Israel. There are differences between the United States and Turkey at the best of times. This does not necessarily mean that they go to, that they're in conflict with each other. I see no immediate conflict, though there are varying interests. I see no immediate conflict right now between Russia and Hezbollah and Russia and Iran at all. None whatsoever. And this is what makes it dangerous. The people who are looking at different points of conflict, I think they're missing, I think this is not the issue. I think that the real danger is that they're very close. This is a serious access right now. And we see what's happening on the ground and what the cessation of hostilities has guaranteed. It's virtually guaranteed Russian freedom of action against all anti-Assad rebel units, not just ISIS, not just Jabhat al-Nusra, all of them. And behind the Russians will be the Iranians and will be Hezbollah. So that's how I'm reading both the general layout and the truce that's supposed to kick in next week.
The Russians are driving the jihadists, the rebels, up against the Turkish frontier. Turkey is responding with artillery fire. I understand there's a ceasefire in Syria, but that doesn't describe the whole map right now. There's a refugee crisis spilling into Europe. Right now, are we on an escalation cycle that has an exit ramp, Lee? Is there some point in the future where this can turn off? Or are we just headed for a period of gunfire, provocations, and then violence again, and then another ceasefire?
I mean, I think it's going to get considerably worse. I mean, if you look at what's happening, you're talking about what's happening on the Turkish border. The Turks are being put to it because they have the Russians there, as well as the PKK.
Right.
And this is an enormous problem for Turkey. And the White House is basically shoving this down their throat. So the way I believe to turn this down, to turn the dial down, is the United States has to take an active position somehow. I'm not talking about landing troops. I'm talking about the United States has to take an active position. It cannot serve as Russia's lawyer. It cannot serve as Iran's facilitator. It cannot serve as Hezbollah's coordinator. But that's not going to happen under this White House, and nor I believe no matter who the next president of the United States is, the first thing that they're going to do is not going to be, how do we take on the Russian position in Syria? How do we get 3,000 Russian Marines out of Syria? Because that's going to make the situation better, but how do we do that? I just think that's an awful lot to ask of the next administration in its first few months and its first few years. So I think it's quite likely that this situation is going to get even more desperate. What we see happening right now is, I mean, as I've argued, it's a three-pronged crisis. We're seeing a genocide unfolding against Sunni Arabs. We're also seeing a major multi-actor war, including not just states like Syria and Russia and Iran. We are also, as well as the varied involvement of Israel and Jordan and other actors around the region, including Turkey, we're seeing non-state actors like Hezbollah, ISIS, and then the third prong of it is a major refugee crisis.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons why Putin is hitting civilian targets like schools and hospitals to make the refugee crisis worse for Turkey and for Europe.
Malcolm, is this the picture you had in Jerusalem, that what we're on is a highway to Hades and there's no exit ramp?
I think generally, yeah, Israel's trying to not get into the middle of this, but very concerned. And a number of the analysts we spoke to see, and I think Lee's referring to this as well, that the Russian, Hezbollah, Iran alliance is emerging as the major challenge in the region in many regards. And I think that the longer the campaign goes on, the closer Russia is driven to Iran, which I think was your point earlier, Lee. But what about Baghdad? You didn't mention anything about how does a longer conflict there impact both Russia's role vis-a-vis the government, the Shiite-backed government in Iraq, and certainly Iran's control over it.
Right. I mean, one of the things that Iran is about right now, I mean, what we need to understand is what it means to replicate the Iranian Revolution, the Islamic Revolution. And what that really means, because we see it quite clearly, it happened in Lebanon. It means creating a parallel structure, which means that Hassan Nasrallah is more important than the prime minister of Lebanon. It means that Hezbollah is more important than the Lebanese armed forces. And this is the same structure that's being replicated right now in Iraq, right, where the popular mobilization forces, the Hezbollah, these are more important than the central government in Baghdad. So these are the things that's happening that, I think that, right now the major player in Iraq is Iran. I understand that Russia is taking a more active position there. But right now, I think, again, the issue in Iraq right now is Iran. And that's a major concern. The way that the Iranians are spreading around the region, I'm afraid that the cessation of hostilities agreement, the so-called truce, is going to further empower, this is the point, to give the Russians a stronger position.
Which gives the Iranians a stronger position.
Well, the Iranians will definitely benefit from the Russian stronger position. I mean, it's Russian air cover that's really carrying the day right now, right? But I mean, this will enhance the Iranians' position and all of their allies around the region. Hezbollah, the Iraqi militias who are fighting there as well.
Lee Smith is a senior fellow at the Huston Institute. He's at the Weekly Standard, Malcolm Hoenlein Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. I'm John Batchelor. Later in the program, Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution and David Drucker of the Washington Examiner analyze the GOP debate in the big state of Texas. John Batchelor, podcast always ready at johnbatchelorShow.com. I'm John Batchelor with Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. The western corridor of Syria, the northern part of it, that's where the large city of Aleppo used to be before it was destroyed by the fighting. But there are millions of refugees who have not left Syria yet, who haven't had the resources or the luck to get free before the Turkish border was closed or near to closed. We welcome now someone who can help us understand what's going on inside Aleppo province, Aleppo city, and Idlib province bordering the coast. This is a landscape that's going to become increasingly critical in the ceasefire that is imminent and in these next months as the armies gather for the next phase. We welcome Fabrice Belange. He is at the Washington Institute, where he's a visiting scholar. He's an associate professor and a research director at the University of Lyon. Professor, a very good evening to you. Right now, you say that there are a potential of 2 million refugees still inside the Aleppo province. I'm presuming that's not also Idlib province, that the Russian, Syrian, Iranian, Lebanese Hezbollah offensive mean to drive out of Syria. Is that correct? Why do they want to drive them out of Syria? How does that help them? Good evening to you.
Good evening. Yes, around Aleppo, there is about 2 million of people, about 1.2 million in Idlib province and about 700,000 in the east of Aleppo province who are under Islamic State control. And as you know, there is a large battle in Aleppo and around Aleppo because the regime want to get back all the city, and they want to close the Turkish border, because if the Turkish border is closed, the rebel will not have any more weapon and ammunition, and the president will die. But to win, you need to secure the civilian from the rebel. It's the first point of what we call counterinsurgency strategy. That's why he's sharing all the area and is pushing the people where they want, but more on Turkey, because also the refugees, it's a clear weapon used by Russia and by Assad against Turkey and also against Europe, because all these people are moving to Europe, and for Europe it's a problem, an internal political problem, and now people are very very afraid about what's happening in Syria, and they would like that the war stopped at any cost, and if Assad can stay at the power, never mind, no, because nobody is interested in Europe by prolonging the conflict in Syria anymore.
Doesn't the driving out of these people increase then the Alawite percentage of the population, which serves Assad's purposes and long-term goals within Syria, that he doesn't mind seeing the population decrease? That for them, then it increases the potential for the Alawites to exercise more control.
Yes, there is a demographic problem in Syria. In 1980s, minorities was about 30% of the population. And you know that Assad is ruling Syria with the help of this community, the Alawite, but also with the Jews and the Christians. And now, in 2010, at the beginning of the uprising, these minorities was only 20% of the population, because there is a demographic transition in Syria. So you need to reduce the part of the Arab Sunni in the population, because the Arab Sunni also, most of the Arab Sunni are supporting the opposition. So it's a kind of political ethnic cleansing for the Arab Sunni. In very specific area like Qusayr, like Babamar, very strategic point, he swept the population, and the population cannot come back anymore in Syria. And in the regime area, no, the minorities are about 40% of the population. But does it mean it's more easy for Assad to keep this area and to rule Syria?
In view of the movement of populations, though, what does this mean then for the creation of safe zones and for the rural areas coming back?
If in the north of Syria we can create a safe zone, people will be protected from the shelling and will stay in Syria. But theoretically, it's possible to create safe zone, but practically on the east of Aleppo, it's Islamic State who is controlling the area, and in Idlib province, the main opposition group it's Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda Syrian branch. So if we create a safe zone, does it mean we create a safe haven for two jihadist groups? So it's very difficult because on one hand we want to protect civilians, but on the other hand we must fight Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. So it will be difficult to implement a safe zone if this zone are ruling by jihadist group.
Professor, the European leaders see what you're talking about, that the weapons of the refugees are they're created by the bombing and the shelling. They see that the refugees are surging to come to Europe, and they see that the battlefield continues. Do they have an answer to this? Are they telling Russia what to do? Are they telling the United States what to do? Or are they helpless? I'm speaking of Hollande and Merkel and Cameron. How do they see this battlefield?
I think Europe finally understand the Assad and the Russian strategy, but it's too late.
It's too late. It's too late.
Too late. And Russia and Europe is weak.
Right.
We don't want any confrontation with Russia.
Right.
So we are expecting a deal with Russia. Okay, you can keep Assad at the power, and please stop the violence and keep the people in Syria and let the refugees come back to Syria. I think that it's a kind of deal that the Europe is going to do with Russia, because we have no any other option. We don't want to make a war with Russia just for Syria.
So they won't even back stronger actions by the United States and would leave them alone, which will also diminish the possibility. Could you quickly comment on the Lebanon situation about the cutting off by Saudi Arabia of the funding to the Lebanese army, what it means?
Saudi is very angry about Lebanon because Saudi see that Hezbollah is more and more powerful in Lebanon. Saudi understand also that the Lebanese army is very close to the Hezbollah. It's not a secret that the Lebanese army and Hezbollah are very...
Professor,
very
I'm sorry, I have to stop. We have to stop. Fabrice Blanche is an associate professor, research director at the University of Lyon, visiting fellow at the Washington Institute, Malcolm Hoenlein Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. You heard correctly. There is no answer in Syria right now. It's too late. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor. Never put you on hold, Malcolm. Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. If I did that, Malcolm would not be happy. I don't put Malcolm on hold. He is always available. We're going immediately to Ankara, the capital of Turkey, now at odds in war in the Syrian civil war. Malcolm, you visited recently, it was much in the headlines while you were overseas, an embassy to Ankara. The situation, as I understand it, is that Israel and Turkey are talking about solving the disputes that started with the Gaza troubles of many years past. What is the status of those conversations?
Right, John. That is definitely the primary discussion between Turkey and Israel is over what the conditions will be. They agreed on the first two demands of Turkey. One was for an apology, which the prime minister, as you remember, gave, and the second was about compensation. And they said they were very close to it. Erdogan, the president, made clear to us that he was satisfied with the progress, but he presented to us an 8-point plan for Gaza. Some of which, frankly, is hard to really understand. He talked about placing ships outside along Gaza's coast to provide energy. He talked about some of the needs. Perhaps it's a ladder that could be climbed down from some of the demands of the practical steps that they're talking about. He also talked about a seaport. There's been a lot of discussion about a seaport in Gaza, but the fact is that unless you have Israelis there on the ground checking it, the concern is that third-party interventions in the past to do security have failed by and large. And you always pointed out that about the UN troops in the first shots left, and that French troops were supposed to be also checking at different times. And so far that has not proven to be a satisfactory way. But what he said to us is that we will monitor everything.
He is the president of Turkey, Mr.
That he will monitor everything that goes into Gaza, the building materials, etc., that they will assure the proper use of these products. The United Nations had promised the same, but we know that a lot of it is being diverted to the tunnels. He, in the discussion of the tunnels, made references to the fact that they don't have roads and there's no commerce. And I said to him, Mr. President, you could say that in regard to the tunnels to Egypt, which were used for smuggling, the tunnels for trade. The tunnels to Israel are only for terror. There's no other purpose. They're not smuggling goods in. They're not doing anything else except terror. And we know that there's an increase in the number of the amount of construction and that the materials are being diverted even in more sophisticated ways. There were 32 tunnels discovered, I think, last year, and now they are obviously engaged again in trying to tunnel under the border for purposes of terrorism. I think for Iran, there is disappointment about the U.S. role. We have had concerns all along about the things that President Erdogan had said and done, but Turkey remains an important NATO ally and plays an important role. That for them, the consequences of the Syrian war are not just the points that you've been making, we've been discussing about what's happening along the border, the refugee flow. Their tourism industry is being decimated. There are 1,300 hotels for sale along the Mediterranean and Aegean seacoast because of the drop of 4.5 million Russian tourists.
The lira has collapsed as well.
It collapsed in their economy. There are many difficulties, and there's concern, I have to tell you, from people we met, civilians, about the rise of terrorism and the impact that has had both on tourism, on the economy, and therefore, the relationship with Israel, by the way, and even during this difficult 5 years, the business between Israel and Turkey, the Turkish people voted by increasing trade every year with Israel. So I would not anticipate an immediate resolution to the difficulties. There are negotiations going on. They have made some progress. The degree to which Erdogan feels pressured into having to come to some conclusion with Israel. And he also is driven by the Mediterranean alliance that he sees emerging with Israel,
this is important.
Cyprus, and Greece. And as you know, I visited those three countries.
And some other of the Balkan states are very interested.
The Balkan states, when we met with President Sisi in Egypt, and I mentioned it, he said, we are partners as well. We're in it. And I will tell you, I can't mention all the countries, but some of the European countries along the Mediterranean, others see this as a very important, viable
President
alternative.
Erdogan has an army planted on Cyprus, Malcolm. I mean, he
has tens of thousands of troops, and he talked about reaching. And I have to say, people I spoke to in Cyprus afterwards were surprised that he talked about reaching a resolution, talked about a confederation, talked about other solutions that were possible to the Cyprus because he sees the energy that Cyprus and Israel have vital to Turkey. He sees the Russian pressure very great, certainly a decisive factor, and of course the war in Syria. The danger posed by Iran. I mean, he is surrounded by problems. And remember, his policy was zero problems with the neighbors. It seems that he has zero neighbors without problems.
That's very good.
And you like that one.
Yes.
And the people in Turkey that we met, very responsive, very warm in welcoming us and reaching out to us. And we spent an hour and a half with the president. We spent over an hour with the prime minister as well. I'm not going to tell you that it all went the way we wanted.
Let's go to Cairo. It went the way we wanted.
Yeah, right. We're going 2.5 hours with President Sisi, and I can't say there was one word there that we were uncomfortable with.
The comedy between Israel and Egypt these last years of all the troubles in the region is the success of the Arab Spring.
Absolutely
and
right.
Going forward, this is a rock to build all the other fallen down houses upon. But, Malcolm, Egypt has a problem to its west that is part of the European threat. This is the failed state of Libya. This is Somalia on Libya with ISIS. ISIS is bombing in Sabratha, well to the west, in Tripolitania province. That's a small little piece of ISIS's lodgment. There at Sirte, the former capital of Libya. Right. That was the gang that Gaddafi ran. Well, Malcolm, I'm told that there are Marine mortar bomber camps at Sirte.
Not U.S. Marines. You're talking about...
Marine division of the Islamic State preparing mortar bomber boats to drive into the tourist ships in the Mediterranean basin.
This is I think is frankly a big issue. I raised with leaders we met in the Mediterranean on both trips to Greece, Cyprus, and
Athens knows about this.
Oh yes, and I said you better be aware that we're going to see piracy again in the Mediterranean, like we see off the coast of Somalia. It's inevitable if you have 5,000 ISIS troops sitting in Sirte with 300 miles from Crete. You have an open sea there. The potential to wreak havoc is very great. And I think there you need a united approach of all the Mediterranean countries to work together to oppose this. You know, ISIS briefly took the capital, the center of I think it's called Sabratha, which is
that's where we bombed. That's where we bombed,
and where we bombed. And they took over the security headquarters, beheaded 12 people.
The day after we bombed, they were back to behead the forces.
The 12, and then they were driven out.
Right.
But it shows that they're active. And President Sisi, others pointed to this, that Libya is, he has a 1,700 kilometer border.
Egypt needs help from Europe. Is Europe going to help?
And the United States. And he is making it an open statement. He is certainly responsive to getting Western assistance from, and particularly for the United States, is both physical presence, role, aid and assistance that I think he needs both to fight because he's fighting the Sinai. He's got a hostile border with Sudan. He's got a terrible threat from Libya. And the stability of Egypt is the stability of the Middle East. You can't take the largest Arab country and have it be destabilized by terrorism and having to fight on all of these fronts, in addition to the domestic unrest that still comes periodically, although I think when you drive around, you see...
We're going to go to the Gaza Strip next. Did the president mention Sinai? Has it been secured, or is it still a smuggler's haven?
No, I think that they've made progress, but I think he expressed concern and that he talked about the buildup under the Morsi regime of the terrorist infrastructure that was there, and talked about how they're cooperating. He said, if 40 years ago I would have told you when Sadat visited Israel that the level of cooperation would have reached this level, would you have believed it?
No.
And he said no one would have believed it. And he talked in those terms about the joint efforts because of the common dangers that they all face.
Egypt is flanked with gangsters. Flanked in Libya, that's Al-Qaeda calling itself Ansar al-Sharia at Derna. Flanked in the Sinai, that's ISIS, that's Al-Qaeda, that's Iran. All of the devils, plus the usual Bedouin smugglers of drug and weapons. All of that flanking Egypt, holding itself together with a brittle economy. And as of the last time I checked, 5 minutes ago, the United States is not cooperating with what Egypt needs. Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. He's back. We're headed to Gaza next. We're going to concern ourselves with what we know right now about the tunnels. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor, Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of Presidents, Major American Jewish Organizations. We go immediately to Jerusalem and we bid good morning to Brigadier General, retired Yossi Kuperwasser. He's director of the Project on Regional Middle East Developments at the Jerusalem Center in Jerusalem. General, a very good morning to you. Before we go to concerns about BDS, a question about the tunnels or the scale of rebuilding of the tunnels, the smuggling tunnels into Gaza, but especially the attack tunnels that were the bane of the war in 2014. I've also heard a possibility of an underground fortress or arsenal or city being constructed by Hamas and its agents, and the debate at the IDF about an intervention being necessary. Can you help us understand what is the extent of the threat right now? Good morning to you.
Good morning, and well, she could be good night for you. I would say that yes, the Hamas considers the underground effort as a major effort, and they're not shy about it because they realize how difficult it is for them to use any facilities underground in order to improve their capabilities to hit Israel. And they consider now the underground as a major effort. Both for infiltrating into Israel and causing damage and terrorism to the people living around the Gaza Strip, and as a tool to better protect themselves. So that's their main effort. They realize that it's much more difficult to hit underground facilities and underground tunnels, including in this respect. But we know that Israel, and in this case, together with the United States, are spending a very big effort in order to be able to thwart these attempts on time. And in this respect, I don't think that it is advisable to take action before time is really pressing. And as far as I understand, this is not the situation right now. And the fact is also that some of these efforts are failing. Hamas claims that one of the reasons they are failing is that there is some sort of secretive Israeli intervention. I don't know to what extent this is right or wrong. But clearly Israel should find ways to have an impact on the way they build those tunnels without going to military operations that are going to put everybody in danger.
Well, I think one of the important things is how Israel was able to arrange the heavy rains that hit Gaza and collapsed, I think, 11 tunnels over the last few days. So it clearly tells you how much construction is really going on right now. I don't know which border they were on, but that supposedly is the number that and took a number of lives of the tunnel diggers who are working around the clock and in all weather. So they're obviously feeling the pressure of a deadline. And you seem to be optimistic that the technology can be developed that will be able to detect it. I know this U.S.-Israel cooperative venture.
There's a huge effort, and the Prime Minister himself, Prime Minister Netanyahu, said yesterday that there is progress in this effort, and it seems that the solution will be found soon. And I hope he's right. I can confirm that there is a big effort, but I hope he's also right about the solution.
It's the first step. But let me ask you, you spoke this week to the Conference of Presidents this past week to a very widely covered session about BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement. You made some very important statements that were noted widely. And you said that just as stabbings are not popular resistance, that they are terrorism, so is BDS terrorism, and at its core, anti-Semitism. Could you explain it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that definitely BDS can be defined as a new form of anti-Semitism in the sense that the BDS is there in order to prevent the Jews from having a state of their own. And by that, singling them out as the only people who should not have a state of its own. In this respect, this is clear anti-Semitism. And the reasons that are being used in order to justify that the Jews would not have a state of their own are the same old anti-Semitic arguments that the Jews are terrible creatures and they are not even a people, and all kinds of other arguments that are clearly anti-Semitic. So in this respect, BDS is new anti-Semitism. The other thing is that the BDS is a tool just like the terrorism wave that we are seeing now. It is a more sophisticated tool in order to bring about the collapse and the demise of the Zionism. Because those elements who are unhappy with the fact that the Jews have a state of their own, regardless of its borders, have realized that the former kinds of terrorism are not very popular anymore. So they are trying to use a more sophisticated manner. So on the one hand, we have here a two-pronged effort. On the one hand, terrorism disguised as popular resistance, that's the name they're using, which is the terrorism without the use of firearms, the stabbing, the drive-overs and all of these kinds of terror that we see happening in Israel every day almost. And on the other hand, there's a more sophisticated political, or I would say, thought war. It's a war about the mind. Because the goal of BDS is not necessarily to bring Israel's collapse by putting the economic pressure.
Its economic success has been very limited.
Economic success is very limited, but the major success is their ability to legitimize the debate about the legitimacy of Israel. That's their main effort and that's their main success. The fact that so many organizations of academics and Christian organizations, things like that, even discuss the idea of delegitimizing Israel and question Israel's right to exist. This is the major...
But what about the backlash that we're seeing now that European governments even and others are beginning to come out, the British government, the Paris City Council, others, let alone institutions here in the United States?
I think what's happening now is that more and more people are made aware of this anti-Semitic and terroristic nature of the BDS. And following that, they come up with all kinds of decisions to stop this phenomenon because people don't want Israel to be under an existential threat. So that's why the British, the Paris City Council, the many parliaments around the world, and definitely many states parliaments and Congress in the United States are taking the decision to make it clear that they oppose BDS and they fully understand the real nature of BDS as an anti-Semitic move. And I'm happy that this is happening, and this is a clear message to BDS. BDS will not pass. BDS will not be acceptable.
One more time, Malcolm. Just define BDS, what it's
boycott, divestment, and sanction. It's a catch-all phrase for an anti-Israel movement that is not about the rights of anybody except denying the rights of Israel.
Yossi Koprovasser, Malcolm Hoenlein. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor. The Republican debate in Texas is concluded. I welcome my two professionals, my colleagues, Bill Whalen of the Hoover Institution and David Drucker, the Washington Examiner. These two gentlemen witnessed the debate. I did not. I've been on air concerned with matters in the conflict zone of Syria, the Gulf, Mediterranean basin. But then there was the conflict zone in Houston, Texas tonight. As I understand it, it was very much defined by three players. Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, leading the polls in everywhere, and Mr. Rubio, Senator Rubio of Florida, and Senator Cruz of Texas. This is a home field advantage for Senator Cruz. Bill, I begin with you because the wait tonight, the buildup was that Senator Cruz and Senator Rubio had the chance to take the fight to Mr. Trump. Were they successful? Good evening to you, Bill.
Good evening, John and David. I think that one of those two candidates got the memo, and that'd be Marco Rubio. Ted Cruz had kind of a curious debate. I'll be curious to hear what Dave has to say about this, but there he was on his home turf, and he thought he might actually take it to Trump, and he didn't. Now, part of this was a bad draw. He got left out of some questions. He didn't have time to get a word in. But from the beginning, Rubio was the first one to drop the gloves, use the hockey metaphor, and take a swing at Trump, and those two had the most lively discussions. And I think one way to score this debate, if we want to score it, would be that Rubio probably won the battle tonight, and that you will see him for the next 24 hours on the news going at it with Trump. But the question is going to be, moving to Super Tuesday and beyond, who won the war? And I'm not sure that anybody but Trump wins the war, because you attack Donald Trump personally, professionally, by policy, and nothing seems to stick to the guy. So for all that Rubio swung at him tonight, I'm not sure what damage he did.
Well, Bill, let me understand this. If we have the argument nobody cares, then these debates are going nowhere. Was there a moment tonight where Trump was surprised by Rubio's aggression, where Rubio seemed to score unusually? Any surprise moments? Because Rubio in the past hasn't been seen as combative.
There was one moment, and that's where where Rubio listened to Trump go on, and he turned and said he's repeating himself. In other words, he used what was used against him by Chris Christie in New Hampshire, and he turned it on Trump, and it got some applause, and Rubio smiled, and Trump kind of gave him a look, and there was your soundbite of the evening. But again, I just reinforce, Rubio will get a lot of airtime for this, but I'm not sure if it does anything to shake loose that hardcore one-third of the Republican electorate that's going to vote for Donald Trump come hell or high water.
Mr. Drucker, a very good evening to you. Your measure of Senator Rubio is apparently carrying the ball most of the night, and Senator Cruz, and we have Super Tuesday on Tuesday. These next 4 or 5 days are going to be very exciting. Do you expect tonight changed any of the results next Tuesday, David? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John. And look, I don't really know, but I think a couple of important points have to be made about the debate, and it's significant nonetheless. Because I don't necessarily disagree with Bill in terms of the fact that we don't know that it dislodges Donald Trump. And you're definitely not going to dislodge his loyal band of followers. They're in it no matter what. But